year of the relationship, so I've been trying every time I'm in here to teach something on it. We had been doing generic things, or things that were applicable to all relationships, but today I've finally going to start drilling down, and I figured I'd talk about the very first relationship mentioned in the Bible, first human relationship mentioned in the Bible, and that is marriage. So we'll be talking about that today. We're going to stay in the Bible, and we're going to start from the beginning. So I know where to start. I mean, the beginning is always a good part. So if you have your Bible, turn to Genesis chapter 2, and we're going to start with verse 18. Genesis chapter 2 and verse 18. And the Lord God said, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him." Out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every bird of the air, and brought them to Adam to see what he would call them. And whatever Adam called each living creature, that was its name. So Adam gave names to all cattle, to the birds of the air, and every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helper comparable to him. And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh in its place. And then the rib which the Lord God had taken from man he made into woman, and he brought her to the man. And Adam said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. All right, so verse 18. God's created Adam, and he makes this statement: "It is not good that man should be alone." Now, what some people find it strange is that we don't go into the creation of Eve. Instead, it says God brings all the animals to Adam for him to name. But that was very intentional. That was deliberate. God was showing Adam that there is a distinction between you and all these animals. He brought them to Adam. Adam named them all. He got to view every single species, every single kind. Okay? I'm sure he began to notice there's a male and there's a female. He's coming in pairs. And yet he finds none that are like him. He didn't come to dogs and stop. A dog may be a man's best friend, but he is not a helper comparable to him. He didn't come to cattle and stop. They're not like us. God's drawing the distinction. He is impressing on Adam, these are animals that I've created, but these are not your companion. These are not the helper comparable to you. A little bit of an aside. You may disagree with me, that's fine. Like Brother Whitley says, you have every right to be wrong. Adam was not a grunting caveman. He was not walking around saying, "Ugh," dragging a big old club. He was fully intelligent with language and reasoning skills. That's the way God created him. So why did people live in caves? Well, if a nuclear bomb wiped out Little Rock, probably would get us too, how many people would know how to build a house from ground up? What I'm trying to say is sometimes just because certain people lack a skill does not mean they're not intelligent. They just lack. If I got dropped in the woods on a desert island, do you think I'd be building a house? No. More than likely, I'm going to find a cave. Not because I'm stupid, walking around grunting with a protruding forehead and no chin, but because I don't have those skills. Just because I don't have those skills does not mean I'm not intelligent or that I'm not human. So why do people live in caves? Well, you know what? They're very handy shelters. In fact, people still live in caves today. They're not any less intelligent, they're not any less human than we are. Cavemen buried their dead, often with tools and mementos of life. They had art, they had music. They had tools made out of stone. Guess what? So do many tribes. Before the Europeans came, the Indians, all they had were stone. They weren't any less human than the people that came from Europe. So people's level of skill or where they live has nothing to do with it. God created us all with intelligence and reasoning. Sorry, that's an aside. I go through this every day with my sons. Just about. All right. Woman is taken out of man. God takes a rib from Adam. Now, I may blow up something that you've always believed, but contrary to some Christians' popular belief, men do not have one less rib less than a woman. They all have the exact same number of ribs. There's a reason for that. I remember finding out about this and being impressed. The rib is the only bone in the body that can regenerate itself. Your bones can repair, but they cannot regenerate, with the exception of the rib. When they do facial reconstruction or bone reconstruction, what they use is your rib. Because if they leave, I got the technical name in here, excuse me, the periosteum. If they leave the periosteum, the covering of the rib, fairly intact, that rib will rebuild and regenerate itself. I just kind of find it interesting that when Genesis is talking, this is one of the only bones mentioned specifically in the Bible. And I just find it interesting that long before all of our great medical knowledge, the Bible says that when God created Eve out of man, he used the one bone that would not hurt Adam in the long run. And he mentioned it specifically. Take that for whatever you want. I love what Matthew Henry said. You'll hear this sometimes in wedding ceremonies. That the woman was made out of the rib, out of the side of Adam, not made out of his head to rule over him, nor out of his feet to be trampled upon by him, but out of his side to be equal with him, under his arm to be protected, and near his heart to be beloved. I think that's a sentiment. I think that's expressing something that is in Scripture, that is scriptural. I think everything God does is deliberate. He does never doing anything off the cuff. He could have taken any bone he wanted. For that matter, he could have formed another human being out of dirt. But he was trying to get across to Adam something. She is you. She's part of you. She's part of your. You are united together. You are one unit. You may be two separate people, but you are one complete unit. Yes, sir.
And that's why when a man finds his rib, he finds the good thing,
Yeah.
and then obtains favor from the Lord, and that's when we become complete.
Yeah.
We're incomplete, really, until we find that one that God has ordained for us to have, and in turn, that's when we become complete as men.
I think that's a good point. I like Brother Whitley puts it this way sometimes. He took, out of Adam, he took everything feminine and made woman. Separated the parts. I also find it interesting. I'm sorry, I've grown up with a love of science, so you'll have to be part. I also find it interesting that when you examine our chromosomes, I don't know if any of you remember this from science class, men have an X and they have a Y. So they have two. Women have two X's. So in other words, there's nothing in woman that is not also in man. Does that make sense? He didn't create a brand new species. He took the X out of man and kind of doubled it and created woman.
That's good stuff.
You
All right.
having a good time over there?
Yes, I am. That's good stuff right there. Oh, man. Mm.
And I'm sorry, again, with the current news, regardless of reconstructive surgery, regardless of hormone therapy, at the core, that man remains a man.
Amen.
His DNA is still XY, or that woman remains a woman, her DNA is still XX, and there is nothing that they can do to change that. In fact, there was a man at Johns Hopkins that used to be the leading gender reassignment hospital in the nation, and they stopped. And he said, we stopped because we realized that although we could make the parts look like the other gender, that was not biologically possible. And so we figured that was doing more harm than help. And so they got out of it. Now there are differences between the genders. It's become politically incorrect to say that. But it's stupid to think that there are no differences. I mean, there's the obvious physical differences for one thing. But there's also the way our bodies are put together. You can take a man and a woman of the same height and weight, and typically the man will have more muscle mass than the woman. It's how the man's DNA is written. There will be more muscle in the man than there is in the woman. That does not make the woman inferior. That does not make the man better. That's just the way God designed it. There's a fat distribution difference. Ladies, when you gain weight, you put it on your body in different places than a man does. I just point out several things that show that there are differences that God designed physically.
That may not be the place to go.
Alright, we'll move on from that. The average height for a man is taller than the average height for a woman. In other words, there's a difference between the two. I have no problem with a woman going out for a man's job, or what's considered a man's job, like a fireman or policeman. What I have a problem with is when in order to do that, they have to lower the standards for the woman to do it. The one that appeals to me the most is in New York. A woman wanted to be a fireman, and firemen were required to be able to carry 300 pounds. They had to lower that standard for her to get in. Well, I happen to weigh about 300 pounds, and if she's coming in after me, I really want her to be able to hear me out. It's kind of important to me. So, and guess what? There are women that can do that, that can carry 300 pounds. So, just don't lower the standards in search of equality. That just results in a lower standard for everything. Emotionally, men are different than women.
Amen.
Women tend to be verbal communicators. They talk a lot. Men less so. There's a range. Not every woman talks a lot. Not every man is silent. But there are the tendencies on both sides. There tends to be a difference in how they mature. Girls tend to mature faster than boys. Now, I have met some immature females of great age. So I'm not saying that's always the case. There's the tendencies. We've also all met man-child, so we know that happens too. Look at parenting styles. Mama doesn't want anything to happen to her baby. Oh goodness, protect that baby at all costs. Dad, little dirt won't hurt him. Let him eat the dirt, he'll be fine. Mama doesn't want baby to lose at anything. Daddy says, you know what, he's gonna learn, and that means I gotta beat him in basketball 300 times. That's what's gonna happen, and he's gonna learn from that. Mama can't understand why Daddy wants to, beat the kid. He's not beating the kid down, he's teaching the kid. Sorry. We'll talk about parenting at some other time. The key that I'm trying to get across here is that there are differences, but that is not. Women are not intrinsically inferior to men, and men are not intrinsically inferior to women. In God's eyes, they are equal. They have value, both together. He's assigned them roles. And so, when he assigns a role to a man, the man tends to be able to fulfill that role because God's not stupid. He's not going to assign a role to somebody and then create them in such a way that they can't fulfill it. Over here in women, he's got a role in mind for them. He created them to fulfill that role. That means that there is a difference between men and women.
But don't you think society's really had a lot to do with that? You got this women's lib and all that. I guess I'm just old school. I was just raised.
That's what I'm saying. There's a real tendency now to say that they're equal at all costs. But I think they're
I'm not saying I'm a second-class citizen by any means, but I agree with you with what you said. There's just some places women don't belong.
okay. Right.
Well, I personally would say that God had ultimately had a plan for us all, and me personally, I wouldn't want a woman that could whoop me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want no. Or I mean, not that I'm, I'm just saying as a whole, I don't want a man-looking woman.
Yeah.
Women are soft.
That's
And that's I think what I think as a man, hey, that's that's the attraction for us. You know what I mean? I don't want nobody to look like me. All buffy and no, I'm good with that.
Well, and I was thinking about what he said about the firemen. The big brouhaha about women in the military and women in. I'm just.
No. I would agree with you on that.
I just think that there are some things, and women, please, y'all those women live people, don't get. I just think there's some things that women. I mean, I'm not saying you need to be barefoot and pregnant and yah, but I'm just saying there's just some places women don't belong.
My answer to that question is that culturally the horse is out of the gate. Now, where I would go on that with women in the military, if they're going to be in frontline infantry units, then they need to be able to shoulder the same load as a man. They took 30 female Marines and ran them through the basic training that they give to infantrymen. Do you know how many of those women passed? I heard 0, but one's close enough to that. So they could not fulfill that role.
And I think that's what I'm saying. That I think God knew what He was doing. You know what I mean? As a whole.
Doesn't it say somewhere that that Eve was a helper to be
a help meet for him?
A helper comparable. That was verse 18. 2:18.
So it ultimately says that what we have done, well, actually what Satan has done, has tried to flip the script, for the purposes really of causing us to be out of order, as a race of people, period, as the human race, we are actually out of order when certain things transpire, and it's really all the hand of Satan, because what he wants to do is to do opposite of what God does, He's against God. He's anti-God. So everything that God does, he tries to my wording, Lord, to diminish it for his will and his purposes. And I think that's where, a lot of things that are coming in, just like what we were talking about. This past week, oh my God. I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the door that was opened years ago. But at the end of the day, God is not pleased.
Yeah.
Not at all.
And I think I said this before, there are ideals that God has that we fall short of. But we're also going to pay the price for not following those ideals. God is not arbitrary. Some people think that God took a list of fun stuff and said, don't do it. No, God took a list of stuff that he knew was going to hurt us and said, don't do it. We're allowing things to happen now that God said not to happen. We're going to pay the price for that. Social science does not agree with some of the decisions that have been made in our country. They would like to tell you different. But when I say social science, I mean studies of children and families do not show that that's a healthy environment. All right, I'm gonna move on from there. God created Eve from Adam. God is the creator of marriage. He put it into place. Wasn't Adam's idea. Adam was looking at a bunch of animals looking for a helper comparable to him. God came and presented to him the woman. Jesus, some folks tend to look at the Old Testament, and I've heard this before, and they want it to be confirmed in the New Testament. I don't agree with that. I think God, the God of the Old Testament, is the God of the New Testament. But if there's any people in here that have that problem, well, Jesus said in Matthew 19:4, and he answered and said to them, have you not read? He who made them at the beginning made them male and female. These are the words of Jesus. He's now quoting from Genesis. And said, for this reason shall a man leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So then they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no man separate. What are you saying, Brother Kim? I'm saying that this is not an archaic notion in Genesis that they threw out in the New Testament. Jesus confirms that what happened there in Genesis is what he intended from the beginning for all time. He confirmed. He said, from the beginning, he made them male and female. From the beginning, the two shall be joined together and become one flesh. Then he said, what God's put together, let no man separate. We're seeing a little bit of, although it's been done in the name of joining, we're seeing separation is what we're seeing. All right. The one thing that I take from that, one of the things to take from that, you notice that he says they are to leave the house of their mother and their father. Just talking about marriage in general. In other words, they become a new family unit. They're starting a new family. Families need to understand this. Mama and Daddy need to understand that Bubba is now married to his wife, and they are now separate. They've moved out of that child relationship. Now, if you haven't had a good parenting relationship, you might be a friend and an advisor, but you are no longer the parent. Husbands need to defend their wives to their family. Families need to defend, wives need to defend their husbands to their family. I had to do this. I had to sit down with my parents and say, you cannot talk about my wife that way. I love you, but you cannot talk about her that way. We make decisions together. Maybe you don't like the decisions that we make, but we make them together as a couple. You know what? I had to do it once, and that was it. Never come up again. Now I know that there are some differences. Some families that where that might be an issue, but if you're in that position with your children, or if you're in that position as your couple, you are supposed to be separate from them. Also, that means that you're not throwing your family up in your spouse's face. You need to be more like that. He's never going to be your daddy. He's a completely different person than your daddy was. She's never going to be your mama. She's a completely different person than your mama was. We tend to marry people that remind us of daddy or mama, but they are still different people. Yes, sir.
One of the biggest things that the scripture talks about, Jesus said in the 5th verse, he said, and shall cleave to his wife.
Yeah.
And that really simply means to be stuck like glue.
Yeah.
You know, that means to be glued together. To where when something is glued together, it's hard to break it again.
Yeah.
You know, and so we have to become that threefold cord that's not easily broken. You know, with God in the center of that, and us as individuals wrapped around God, and in turn we're that threefold cord.
I like that.
That's not easily broken.
Yeah.
And I think that's how we overcome as men and women of God. We overcome when we don't allow ourselves to become separated.
That's a good point. So I guess the first thing I would take from the verses we read in Genesis, again, we're one unit. That means that we've got to find a way that works for us.
Absolutely.
What worked for mom and dad may not work for you and sweetie. I want to do the male version. May not work for you and hunky. I was trying to throw in, male and female because God both. All right, what are the purposes of marriage? Companionship. He said, it's not good for Adam to be alone. He needs a helper comparable to him. And we've already kind of touched on this. She is going to fill in his gaps. She's going to be what he cannot be. She's going to fill the holes. He's going to fill the holes that she cannot be. They're supposed to build each other up. They're supposed to meet each other's needs. Now, I know this verse is talking about friends, but I really think it does apply to marriage. And that's in Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. Don't be dragging down your husband. Don't be dragging down your wife. You're supposed to be building each other up. Your left hand may not be as strong as your right hand. Are you going to cut your left hand off? She's a part of you. He's a part of you. If you're going to attack her or him, you are attacking a part of yourself. Together, you should sharpen each other. And Brother Woods has already mentioned it. Ecclesiastes 4:9. 2 are better than 1, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him. Again, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? Though one may be overpowered by another, two can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. That's what he was just talking about. I love that. I was looking at that. I was talking about marriage. I'm talking about husband and wife, and then it says a threefold cord. And I was going to kind of gloss that over, but I think he pegged it exactly. Man, woman, God. You mix those three together, and there is not a devil in hell who can tear it apart. Not one. You put all three of those together, and nothing can stop your marriage. All right. Now, I want to get into that with the little time that we have before. All right. I said I was going to do it, so we'll do it. All right. The other thing mentioned specifically in Genesis, something that you don't often hear taught or from the pulpit, but sex is involved in marriage. My son, whenever he goes, you know, Dad, S-E-X. And I always tell him, son, it's a word. Say it, sex. It's not a dirty word. It's not an ugly word. It's a part of life. God created it. And it's right there in Genesis. It's right there. He said, the two shall become one flesh. Now, I used to think that was just my own invention, that signified sex. Until last week when Brother Whitley was preaching, and in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, this is what Paul said, or do you not know that he who is joined to a harlot, or in other words, has sex with a prostitute, is one body with her? For the two shall become one flesh. So Paul says right there that when it's talking about one flesh, what it's talking about is sex. I'm not stepping outside of Scripture. In fact, I just used one Scripture to show you exactly what he meant in Genesis. God created it. God invented it. If you get a group of people who've not been around me very long, and you ask them who created sex, there will be a portion that will tell you the devil did it. The devil did not do it. God did it. God created it. God had a purpose for it. God had a plan for it. It isn't dirty. In fact, in Hebrews 13:4, it says marriage is honorable among all, and the bed undefiled. That when it talks about the bed, it's talking about sex. It says when it is within marriage, it is honorable, it's undefiled. Go for it. Now, Paul went on to say fornicators and adulterers will be judged. What are you saying there, Brother Tim? What are you saying is God created it. He created it in the context of a marriage. And he said if you're going to take it outside of that context, it's going to be judgment. There's going to be consequences. In other words, it's one of those things where if you disobey what God said, there are going to be consequences. I'm not stepping out on a limb to say that. It's going to happen. The first one, obviously, is pregnancy, but there are others. All right. Let's talk about sex for a minute. What's its purposes? Well, Genesis 1:28. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fulfill the earth and subdue it. So the first purpose of sex is babies. Not rocket science here, okay? That's what God designed you to do. So nobody should be surprised when a woman gets pregnant. It shouldn't come as a shock to anybody. It means everything's working the way God meant it to work. And you know what's amazing? You know what's amazing to me? We work really hard to prevent that, but even as hard as we work, it still happens. Why? It's because that's the purpose God made it for. Or that's one of the purposes God made it for.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
This is kind of an opinion type deal.
Okay.
I just want to know what your opinion is. When it comes to believers in the aspects of their marriage, do you think that they should use birth control?
Oh, Lord.
All right.
We gonna stay here.
You know, I actually had that.
Need to go get some cake.
I actually had that in my notes, or I debated putting that in my notes. But now that you've brought it up, all right. 2 times God gives the command, be fruitful and multiply. There are 2 times in Scripture. One is Genesis chapter 1, where Adam and Eve are the only 2 people there. And if they don't multiply, nothing happens. We ain't here. The second time is after they come out of Noah's Ark. He tells Noah and his family, be fruitful and multiply. Guess what? If Noah's sons don't start having babies, or their wives, excuse me, don't start having babies, again, we're not going to be here. Okay? So I think those fruitful and multiply commands were given in 2 very specific circumstances. So I'm not against birth control. I think that's up to each believer. I think God wants us to use our brains. Okay? It used to be that we worked on farms, and also that children were, I don't remember the exact statistics, but very few children survived. And so you wanted to have as many children as possible because there was only a guarantee that only a few would survive. We are no longer in those times. It's now the other way around, especially in America. Most babies born are going to live. Even some that are born in horrible circumstances are still going to live. All right, here's the deal. Feel free. If you don't want to practice birth control, I'm okay with that, but you're going to pay a price for that. My grandpa and grandma had 17 kids.
Doovers?
No, yeah. They had 17 kids. They were dirt poor because they had 17 kids. I think God's given us wisdom, and personally, I think that's a personal decision. I don't think there is an order from God saying no birth control or have birth control.
I'm just being.
That's my personal opinion.
And I think a lot of times well, not a lot of times. I think you have to use wisdom for your specific situation.
Yeah.
You know, if you your spouse may have health problems. You know what I mean? So you know, you don't want to continue to put your spouse in danger. You know, for those reasons. You know, so yeah, I think that's wisdom. You know, that you would have to. You know, distinguish that for your particular situation.
There's a case in the Bible where another one that they point to for the no birth control. A man by the name of Onan was following a custom that was called the Levirate marriage, which essentially is this: he died. His brother died without having a child. So it was the living brother's job. It was his social requirement to produce a child from that man's wife. That was how it worked. That was formalized, that they even practiced that in Israel. Onan, the Bible says, stilled his seed on the ground. And what some Christian organizations say, and God struck him dead because of that. And what some Christian organizations say, see there right there, God says don't use birth control. I don't think the issue was birth control at that point. Onan was disrespecting God, and he was disrespecting his brother. He wanted to have sex without the responsibility. I don't think the issue was birth control there. I think it was a matter of disobedience and disrespect. He was not following what God had asked him to do. But some organizations will point to that and say, see, no birth control. I don't agree with that. Exercise judgment. We'll save this one for the next time we're here. Sorry, go ahead.
It's just, I think about just my household. I've got one in college and one going to college, to starting college in the fall. And that's not easy.
Right.
But I know, that the Lord will provide, that you kind of feel torn, about having 4, 5, 6 kids and knowing that they're going to go, well, mine are going to college,
Yeah.
and they're going, but then I know you're supposed to trust the Lord to provide, so that's confusing to me.
Again, I'm gonna leave that to the judgment of the individual. My wife and I made a deliberate decision to not have it work over. My wife, God bless her, sometimes I felt like if I looked at her when she got pregnant. So we made a very deliberate decision to prevent that. So, but I do understand where you're coming from too. God will take care of you. My grandma had 17 kids, not one of their kids starved.
Well, see, and that's what I mean. That's what I mean. And I know that I have a good friend that's a Catholic.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as Virginia Slim says, they've come a long way, baby, because I think the Catholics are even now condoning birth control, because you get so many, and I know, in this day and time, and I'm not saying, I know you have to trust the Lord for your needs. We're told you don't worry about what you're going to eat, what you're going to wear, and I know that, but at the same time, some sense has to pop up in there somewhere. You can't have 6 kids at college at the same time.
That's where I'm coming from. In our culture, the American culture, children are expensive.
But a lot of people they're not down with that. A lot of Americans aren't down with that. I mean, it depends on what you.
Just saying, I'm going to leave that up to the individual. All right, there are more purposes to sex. We'll get into them the next time I'm here, probably 2 weeks from now. We'll talk about it then. It's already after 11. Thank y'all. Marriage is important. 1. 2, sex is a part of it. Companionship is a part of it. All those things. But we'll leave you with that. We'll talk more about it next time I'm here. If you have any questions after that, come see me. We'll talk about it. All right. Thank y'all.